Microsoft released 15 years ago .NET Framework 1.0, and basically they decided that they will deliver the complete framework with everything you need to build application for Windows platform, like web application, Windows form, or Windows service, or some other type of service that can be run on Windows server. It was quite good idea at that time. So you can just have everything you need in one box. Because I remember this Visual Studio 2003 box that got also some book inside, and in this book there was step-by-step guide how to create desktop application, how to create client-server application, and everything you need was inside this .NET framework, and only tool you need was this Visual Studio. But the times changed, and right now, if you want to develop some modern application on mostly on web as a web application, you need to combine several different technologies, and companies found out that they cannot deliver one single tool that will provide every functionality that developers need. So something has to change, and that change was announced by Microsoft as the new platform .NET Core. So it's not the platform that gives you everything, it's basically some building blocks that helps you to build multi-platform applications, services, and more based on some modular system. So for those who don't know me, I'm Tomáš Jecha. I am .NET team lead here. I am also Microsoft MVP for about 8 years now, and next 60 minutes I will spend on mostly on some demos related to new .NET Core. So in the beginning, there is always fight between some backward compatibility and modern trends. Who's here working with the Visual Studio or .NET C#, something like that? Most of you, great. And who's working with the NPM and basically live in JavaScript world? Okay, I was expecting little more JavaScript people in audience, but that's okay. So this is one vector. Another vector is fight between the modularity and framework, because a lot of developers, .NET developers, prefers to have full framework with everything they need, because the components in the framework are somehow standardized, and you can use single documentation, and you have in most cases one vendor that can give you some hot fixes and things like that. So you don't need to install tens of libraries and finding way how to make them work together. Where do you think the .NET platform or the .NET framework was in the beginning, and where it is now? Any ideas? Well, it was something like here, because okay, let's ignore .NET Framework 1, but starting .NET Framework 2, it was like 10 years ago. Nothing much changed since then. They trying to keep backward compatibility, but they find out that they cannot give you everything you need in one framework, because this framework was released, I don't know, once per year, new version. So, for example, the first version of Entity Framework as a ORM mapper for SQL Server was inside the .NET Framework itself, but later then find out they need to deliver it separate, because they need to deliver faster than just once per year. So they introduced something called NuGet. NuGet is a tool we are using in almost each application, and it's copy. I guess I can say it's copy of NPM from Node.js. It has lot of similar principles. On the other end, there are things like React or Angular. Okay, don't hate me for placing it somehow on in these places, but I guess Angular is more like framework, React is more like modular system, that you can use in any way you want. And all of these are more close to these modern trends. It's like in JavaScript world you can hear things like it's so 2015, so we don't want to use it and things like that. Okay, I'm a little bit joking, but it's something like that. Nobody in .NET Framework will tell you that's 2 years old, and so you cannot use it because it will be outdated or obsolete. And there is this .NET Core. So Microsoft tried to create something that is much more modular, and that is open to the modern trends, but also Microsoft will try, or at least they promised, to keep some backward compatibility. So they created for versions of .NET Core some long support model, and you can read about different version, how long they will be supported, how long you can find the new versions, new features, how long it will be supported for bug fixes and things like that. So Microsoft just tried to restart the .NET Framework, and the .NET Core is not a replacement for .NET Framework, it's an alternative. And it's alternative targeted for web applications, multi-platform web applications, and some services, because they want to offer quite a lot of things that's needed for these type of application. But if you want to write some Windows application, like some form application in WPF on WinForms, you can still use, and it should be still preferred to use .NET Framework. Also, you can combine these two, and if you, for example, don't need to run your application on Linux, you can use .NET Core, but you can use the libraries built on the full .NET Framework for Windows. So you will not be able to deploy it on, for example, Mac, but you can use the new features from .NET Core, but running along with the libraries built for .NET Framework. Okay, so what is this .NET Core about? There are a few main features. First thing is that it's fully open source. It's fully open source on GitHub, so you can find all tasks, current source code, everything. You can fork it. You can download specific version. It's quite nice to see this change in Microsoft, because he already did it, for example, for ASP.NET MVC or Entity Framework, or some parts of Entity Framework. But this .NET Core is fully open source, like the garbage collection, build system, everything you can, runtimes, you can download the source code and you can contribute to it. For example, who knows the Mono project? Okay, quite a lot of you. It was basically a way how you can take the application written and compiled for full .NET Framework and run it on Linux. The good thing is that on .NET Core, huge amount of contributors to this project are people who have already been contributing to Mono. So Microsoft used the knowledge of people who are developing for about 8-10 years of Mono. They use them, and they helped them build .NET Core, so they can avoid some common pitfalls, for example. Okay. So this is some diagram of how development for .NET platform can work now. You've got something called .NET Standard Library, which is a very interesting concept, and that's basically the part of .NET that's same on .NET Core and full .NET Framework. And you can write libraries that's called .NET Standard Libraries that can be used on both full .NET Framework and .NET Core. So that's quite a good thing if you want to somehow work with the .NET Core, but you've got something written in .NET Framework, so you can, for example, port part of the applications to these .NET Standard Libraries, and then you can use it. Then you can use it in your .NET Core applications, for example, or on Linux. And it's expected that in .NET Core you will start writing in ASP.NET Core, which is a web platform. It's some abstraction on web servers. that can run on some Linux web servers, on Windows IIS, and many more based on how you host it. It's not like the old ASP.NET where you need to have installed full-featured IIS server, which is for some simple REST endpoint quite unpleasant thing to do. And of course, if you want to continue for Windows development, you can still use the .NET framework, but also you can use inside it some .NET standard libraries. So if you are using libraries like Newton-JSON, or you want to use the new entity framework, or you can use it because it's .NET standard library, and you can use it in both .NET framework and .NET Core. And everything under it is also open source. So, for example, compiler, you probably heard about it. Someone said that language is mature when the compiler for this language is written in the same language. So this happens finally for C#. So there is compiler called Roslyn, which is open sourced, and it compiles your C# code to the IL language, intermediate language. And also there are some runtimes components related to garbage collections and things like that. There is one more change. Until now, it was basically required to use Visual Studio for developing applications in .NET. But the new model modifies how the project files look like, how it's defined, and you can use both full Visual Studio, which is totally supported and in most cases correct, and also you can use some other editors like Visual Studio Code or any other editor you want. Okay, so what's the technology stack you want to use if you want to build application in .NET Core? You will of course start with the .NET Core itself, which is the runtime, compilers, and some base class libraries that defines, for example, some collections and some basic types. And most parts of this .NET Core itself is written in .NET. But there is always some small part that is native. So if you want to install .NET Core, you need to download and install runtime or compilers for the specific platform you want to use. And currently there are supported quite a large variety of Linuxes and Mac OS and of course Windows. On the top over .NET Core, you can use ASP.NET Core, which is abstraction on some web servers, and you probably don't want to do just some simple thing like receive response and answer with something. So you can probably use, or you don't need to, but you can use ASP.NET MVC Core 1.1. It was called before as the ASP.NET MVC 6, but it was renamed to ASP.NET MVC Core 1, and right now there is version 1.1. And on the top of it, you can use some .NET Core tooling for Visual Studio. So you can use you can write these applications just the way how you write it ASP.NET Forms, ASP.NET MVC for full .NET framework. Okay, that's all of my presentation, and I will switch to demo. So I can show you what's the differences, how you can write the code, what's the differences in the project, and also I will show how Microsoft tried to include the NPM into Visual Studio and how you can use it together in one project. Okay, so I will open this project. This is the project if you visited last ACTUM Academy, or even if you didn't visit it, you received some survey form, and this is it. So after the presentation, I will also place it on GitHub, so you can download it, you can check it. use it as a boilerplate plate if you want. And this is still Visual Studio release candidate, so it's possible it will crash or something like that. I hope not. Okay. So right now I opened the project, and in the project there are 2 tasks that's done every time the project is open. First is that the NuGet packages are restored. So it should be there. I can see it finished, so that's okay. And also Webpack, which is task runner in Node.js, started, and it started as in the watch mode, which means that it checks the source code, and if I change something in the source code, it will automatically rebuild the part of the output that's related to the source code. So of course this Webpack is related to the CSS styles, some JavaScript files and things like that. So we will get to it later. Okay, so what has changed in the Visual Studio? We are still having the solution. Solution is the set of the projects you are working on, and I've got 2 projects. One is surveys.web, which is the web application, and surveys, which is some library that contains data access logic and some business logic, just in case, for example, I would like to write some console application that's created, that do some, for example, aggregation and send some reports, and something I don't want to place in the web application. Okay, so if I start with this surveys project, there is nothing interesting. I used Entity Framework Core 1.1 or 1.0. I don't remember right now. It doesn't matter. And I used some migration. So what I did was prepare some kind of DTO objects, and then from these DTO objects I created the database, and I didn't need to use Management Studio to create columns, tables, relations, and things like that. So I just prepared a DTO object, and then I run the magic command update database, and it should show me that the database is already up to date. No, it will crash. Okay, guys, you didn't see that. It's just like using these beta versions, but
By the wrong project selection, I have the web entity of the library.
yeah, you are right. Thanks. Okay, database updated because I've got my data classes in the surveys project. So database is already updated because I prepared some data to it. I prepared some survey template, so we can show some survey form, and it's just like the old DLL. The output of this project is DLL, but the more interesting part is the web part. Maybe you heard about who heard about project JSON file? Okay, some of you did. They already canceled it, so it's no longer there. They returned back to CS profiles, and CS profiles were quite complicated, for example, to merge. But for example, you need to specify all files that's included in project. They remove the most pain in the ass elements from these configuration files, so it's quite shorter. And right now you just specify the folders that can be excluded, and also you specify the NuGet packages. In older project version in .NET Framework, you got something called project.config or packages.config, and it contains all NuGet packages that are installed in the project. Right now they move it to the project file itself because it makes more sense. because in the project file you already got, for example, references to other projects. So right now you've got there also references to NuGet packages you want to use inside your application. It's just like the packages JSON in npm for Node.js. Okay, there's nothing more here. You can specify some build scripts, like for example, you can specify what happens before the application is deployed, which can be used, for example, if you want to do some npm commands. You, for example, wants to be sure that before deployment, that, for example, this Webpack is executed and it builds or JavaScript files and CSS for production use. So you can specify it here. Okay, and the project itself, there is the web config. Web config, you know web config as a file where you define quite a lot of things. Most of it in web applications are related to configuration of IIS. Right now, the web config is not required, and it contains only some simple bootstrapper that tells IIS that if you use this application, if you want to host it inside the IIS, it will use something called ASP.NET Core module to serve all HTTP requests that's received by your application. So you don't define here anything else, just some bootstrapper for IIS, and you will probably not change it after you created your project. So forget about web config. So where the configuration should be stored. Quite interesting thing about the .NET Core is that it does not define how the configuration should look like, from which source it should be read, or even if you want to have any configuration anywhere stored. And there is this file, startup CS, and that's the bootstrapper for our web application. That defines what happens where your application starts and what will be the processing pipeline for HTTP requests received by your application. And in the beginning, in the constructor of this class, you can see that I am using here some configuration builder. And Microsoft provides you, I said that configuration is, you don't need to have any configuration files, but in most cases you would like to have some. So you use something called configuration builder, and I just telling to this configuration builder that I would like to use some JSON file, application JSON, which is stored here. I hope there will be no password to production database. No, okay. And there are just some simple settings in JSON. I can use other different sources. I can read configuration from database. I can read configuration from 2 different files. I can do whatever I want with the configuration files. So this is one point of extensibility. Like, for example, in this project, I split the configuration. I've got one config file that defines where the application will be hosted on some types of web servers. And in these app settings, I've got some configuration for application itself, like connection string to database and some super secret strong password. Interesting thing about configuration in .NET Core is that you can use some DTO configuration object. If you write configuration, I don't even know how it was called, when you want to create a configuration element for your web config. It was quite unpleasant thing, because you need to do quite a lot of things, some registration of these parts of your config file. In ASP.NET Core, for example, I've got these settings with only single property password, and I created class that contains these properties. And then in configuration file, I'm just telling that in configuration part settings, which is the name of the property in this settings.json. There is the web settings element, and this also registers it to dependency injection container. And every time, for example, any controller in my application will have dependency on web settings, like it requires it through the constructor. It will be injected, and you can use this configuration directly from the controllers. Okay, so that gets us to the second part. In the first part, we just try to init and load configuration, nothing more. In the second part, you are trying to configure services. This is the configuration of some dependency injection container. There is some default lightweight dependency injection container in .NET Core, and you can use it if you want. If you don't want to use it, you can use some connector to some other dependency injection container of your choice. For example, it can be Unity, Castle Windsor, anything you want, and you can overwrite it here. But we are not doing it. I'm just using the default dependency injection container because it's enough for this simple application. I'm registering here some web settings from the configuration and also some other services. For example, I'm registering service that's used by ASP.NET Core to resolve the language for the request, and also some other things, like, for example, survey service. Survey service is facade to access data in database. And this survey service requires data context, which is entity framework class that basically representation of connection to database. And I'm also registering it here. And I'm also telling that it should use connection string from my configuration, which is the part of this JSON file, to inject it inside this survey data context. So this survey service, it requires survey data context in the constructor, and from this point, just writing these 2 lines or few lines, I can read the connection string from the configuration file. I can set up that if anyone wants survey data context, it will be delivered and the connection string from configuration will be used. And if anyone would like to receive the instance of survey service, it will be used for basically each request, or each request for this service will be created new instance of survey service, and to each instance of survey service, the data context will be injected. And that's basically everything you need to set up. If you try to configure a dependency injection container and something like this in a regular .NET framework, it was little more complicated than just this. Good thing about these .NET Core technologies is that almost every technology using the dependency injection support is implemented in it. So you can inject dependencies into controllers of ASP.NET MVC application. You can use it in the entity framework. You can use it in integrated logging tools that are included in that are written for .NET platform, .NET Core platform, and basically every other project that will be based on the .NET Core platform. It's expected to support this this dependency injection. Okay, so the last part is maybe most interesting because it defines what happens in case the request is received and the request needs to be processed by your application. You are defining the chain of some called middlewares that will process your request. And first thing is that I will use, if I'm in the development environment, which is another feature that you can define environments. Then if I'm in a development environment, I use developer exception page. Because if you create application for ASP.NET on IIS, there was quite a lot of things that happens even if you don't configure anything. For example, these error pages, these ugly yellow pages. You need to do some steps to turn it off. In a .NET Core, you have nothing. If you just don't configure anything, then the web server will always return the empty response. So you need to explicitly turn on the exception page. And if you don't like this exception page, so for example, someone will write something more useful for you, you can remove this and you can use some other. Or you can fork the project that defines these exception pages, and you can modify it and use it. So it's not like built-in exception page that's almost the same for 10 years in ASP.NET, and you need to do some steps to get rid of it. You can just, what you define, that's what you get. Also, I'm defining that the request will be, culture of request will be set based on some client requirements. I also said that the static files can be served. So everything that will be in some special folder www root will be served if request match with some file name inside that folder. This is also something in IIS you get it by default. Here you need to configure it, and you can override it. For example, you can point to some virtual directory, for example, in your database instead of file system. I've got also some other stuff here, and from the application regular request, you will use this MVC, and you define some routes like you did in the regular ASP.NET MVC 5. This client ID middleware is something. It's basically use of middleware I wrote because I needed something. If I look at it, it's just a simple class that creates some unique identifier. It reads it from cookie from client, and if client didn't send this cookie, it will create the new one and send it to the client. So client have some permanent identification, and it's used for example, in this case, that if you open the survey form again, your original values will be loaded, and you can update it and save it again without resubmitting it again. If I look at the controllers, it's exactly the same controllers like you already know from MVC 5. Changes that you can use this constructor injection. So I'm trying to resolve the service to access to database, and also some settings. These settings I'm using to read the password if user try to show some restricted part of the web, like results of survey, and that's it. If you look at the HTML templates, it's almost the same like in old ASP.NET MVC. They added few interesting features, but in most cases it's almost the same. They added something called tag helpers, where you can use, instead of these add something HTML dot action link and things like that, you can use example something like this. If you want to create link, and ASP.NET MVC will find these attributes, ASP controller, ASP action, and they will translate it to some regular attribute like reference attribute, and it will be translated to something that your browser will understand.
What about additional parameters? If you want to create link to the controller and action that way, Additional parameter.
There is, I think there is some special type of attribute like ASP parameter or road value or something like that. I think it's there, but you can still use this this regular approach like add HTML action link. So it's just an alternative. Okay, the application is there's some ugly jQuery. You don't want to see it, and that's basically it. I can try to run application, but before that I would like to show you how I used the npm and Webpack to prepare my style sheets, images, and things like that, and how it helps me even in this simple application. So if you are using the npm, you know there is this file packages.json that contains each npm dependency you get in your project. It's just like this NuGet dependencies, but from the other source and for something other. But also you are defining the names, identifiers of packages, versions, and good thing is that Visual Studio will restore it if you open the project. It will handle the installing packages. Like you need to write the npm install. This will do Visual Studio for you. Also, you can see there's the dependencies section here. You probably don't see it. I executed some. Okay, that didn't help. Yeah. Okay, so in the classic .NET Framework project, you've got in dependencies just the list of the libraries and projects you are referencing. In this new type of .NET Core project, you've got also the NuGet references, so you can see exact NuGet packages that you are referencing, and also the references, what are the dependencies of these packages. You can see exactly the same for the npm, and also you can see which projects you are referencing, like this is the survey project with the data access logic. It also supports Bower. Bower is something written on the top of the Node.js, just like the npm, so you can use it or not, it depends on you, but Visual Studio supports it. So, let's see what are these packages. All of these packages are in section dev dependency, so I use it only for development. It's not used on production. These are some basic Webpack packages, which is related to the Webpack task runner. Webpack is not by default supported by Visual Studio. By default, there is supported only Grunt and Gulp. And Webpack can be in. There is some quite a simple extension to support also with Webpack. Visual Studio got some extension points, so it should be easy to write support for another task runners. So what does it do? I can see that I've got some Webpack config file which defines me some steps that can be executed for this task runner. And right now I'm using this watch development, and I will try to look it here. Open some, for example, CSS file. And I will try to update something. And if I hit save, you can see there was some recompilation done here, and it recompiled me some output CSS files, some output bundle that I'm referencing directly from the website. You can see that these are the less files. Instead of picking the final CSS file for the Bootstrap, I take the source of the Bootstrap, which is or was written in the less CSS, and so you've got support, for example, for variables. So if I want to change some color, I can just change the variable, and the Bootstrap will be recompiled, so the correct color will be used. That's something, for example, if you are using Bootstrap, it's in the variables.less, where you've got defined everything in Bootstrap with some variables. So if you want to use the less file, which is not recognized by most of the browsers, you need to have something that will compile these less files to the final CSS files, and that's what the Webpack does. The configuration in Webpack is in some file webpack.config.js, and I'm defining which files I want to take as entry files, where should be placed the output files, and I need to tell to Webpack what it should do with the files in the input. And it's not like just it takes, for example, the CSS files or the less file and compiles it and places it to the output. It also reads the references. So if I'm, for example, define some image inside the CSS file, the Webpack will also fetch this image. So it will copy everything it needs to be, everything the CSS file or the input files needs inside the output folder. So in this source folder, I've got all these less files, fonts, images, JavaScript files, and in the output, there is one bundle.js. It's Webpack, of course, can create different types of structures, but I just made it simple. I just said that output will be everything in bundle.js, and it will just compile everything, the CSS files, the JavaScript files inside this one JS file, and there are also quite a lot of different image files. And I just defined that if there's some image file, it will create the file based on the hash of the file. So in case I change some file and redeploy application, so my application will definitely needs to use the new version, because it will also update the style sheet in this output folder with the hash as the name of the file. Of course, there are a huge amount of things you can do with the Webpack, but I use it just as a simple, just have the source files and somehow compile it, uglify it, and place it in the this folder. And in the layout, I'm just referencing this bundle.js, nothing more. Okay, so good thing is that we can use this npm from the Visual Studio. So if we are working on some project with someone who's working with the npm, we can use it together on one project. And the developer who works with the npm don't need to use Visual Studio. He can use his tools, and when he push it to the repository and you downloaded it, then Visual Studio will automatically install new npm packages, and if you set it right, it will also recompile everything, and it should work quite seamlessly. For example, this watch development, I set it that it should be executed on project open. So I don't need to do anything. I just need to open the project. Visual Studio will download our npm packages, and then it will start me this watch Webpack. So every time I change something, it will be recompiled, and I don't need to do anything. And I can focus on development, the application itself. Okay. So now I would like to show you how you can deploy this application, and okay, it can be quite boring. I can just click publish and just choose where do I want to publish it. If I choose, for example, Azure App Service, if you are having some Azure account, you can publish it directly in Azure. I will not try to do it because I've got database locally, and of course from application deployed to Azure, it will not be accessible. But if you run the website, surveys, so I already deployed to the Azure, but of course I use the cheapest hosting, so it shuts down the application sometimes, and it needs to be started again. And it's started. This is I have to say it's a free hosting. I use the free hosting. Of course, the Azure got some variation of deployment where it can be running all the time, so it will be accessed. But of course, if I execute it again, it's fast. Okay, I will do something different. I will create the folder deployment, and I will deploy the application to the publish output folder, and I can try open the IIS. I will create the new website, and I will select the path of my project. So it's like this. Okay. And let's see if it works. Okay, you can also see the green color I changed in the less file. So it started, and I would like to host it also on Linux. So I will connect to the CentOS, which is the Red Hat, is similar to Red Hat, and I will try to install the .NET Core here. This is completely clean installation of CentOS. I just change the font size so you can see something. Okay. And if I just find the .NET Core on Google, you can see the installation guide. So you just choose the Linux and huge amount of distribution you want to install it on. So I used from CentOS or Oracle, and I've got it right here. So the first part is just to install some libraries that the .NET Core requires. Okay, and then I just download the .NET package, unpack it somewhere, and make some link to this folder so it can be executed with command .NET. I will keep it working, let it work, and open some tool I can use to transfer the files to the Linux machine. Okay. Okay, internet, probably some problem with internet. Okay, in the meantime, I just take this publish output folder and copy it to the target machine. It's exactly the same folder I used to add as an application in the IIS. I didn't recompile it. I just use it and copy it to this machine. Okay. Let's see if it will be we will be able to copy it. If not, I will just restore the original prepared image of the virtual machine. Okay, it seems it takes. Okay, I will just give it some time. It's, I don't know, 50 megabytes, so it should be quite fast, but I don't know why it takes so long here. I will just return for a moment to the project. And one thing I wanted to tell you that I used different functionality in this project, like the MVC, like these configurations and some other stuff. But it's not included if you create the empty project. If you create an empty project, you don't have anything like the MVC there or some other things. You've got just clean project, and everything I used here, I needed to reference first. So if I look at the NuGet packages I used, you can see there's this Microsoft ASP.NET Core, which is the ASP.NET Core itself. There is extension for it for MVC. There is even extension for static files, and also some functionality related to entity framework, some related to logging, and other stuff. So you can use different modules, different packages that Microsoft offers, and use it. But if you don't want to use it, you don't need to reference it, you don't need to download it, you don't need to distribute it with your application. The .NET Core itself don't have these references. All these references, all these parts are downloaded with the NuGet. Okay, I think we will not be able to download it here, but I will just apply the checkpoint and just start the machine where everything is installed. Just you can see that works. But it's quite simple, because in both Windows and .NET you will have the command .NET. So I can call .NET from both Windows shell and also .NET from the Linux. And I will copy application to it. Okay, so I have placed there the new compiled version. Go to the folder, and right now you can just call the .NET and then tell the command. There are a few different commands, like .NET new. If you call .NET new, it will create a template for a new empty project. If you call the .NET build, it will try to build the project in the current directory. There is also some .NET publish, but if you pass as the argument the name of the compiled DLL, I guess it's not, you cannot see it, but it just started the application, and it's listening on some port 5000. So I can try it from my computer. It's 2, I think. Okay, and it started. So it's running exactly the same from the Linux. There are some differences, something that's not implemented on Linux properly yet. It's still the first version, and I can just try if it's got connection to the database, because I created some sample survey. Okay, and it works. So it just shows some questions to the user, and you can use .NET Core if you want. It's getting better and better each day, but it's still version 1.1. Version 1.0, there was this project JSON files. It was different, and they are trying to fix it. It was just like with the .NET Framework this 15 years ago, because they created .NET Framework 1, then some 1.1, then they created some other versions, and they changed it quite a lot of things because they find out that their initial concept is not working good enough. And then they created .NET Framework 2.0, and since .NET Framework 2.0, they're just adding features. So it's not like they are changing a lot of things each version, but they are trying to keep backward compatibility, because since .NET Framework 2.0 is, like they say, good enough. And I guess the exact same situation will be with the .NET Core. We are starting with .NET 1.0, 1.1, and maybe in about a year they will come with the .NET Core 2.0, and it will be quite stable, and we can use it on some larger projects. Right now it's still quite a lot of experimental. Okay, so that's everything from me. If you've got any questions, just ask. But thank you for your attendance. Okay.
Is it a big deal to migrate from old MVC5 application, ASP.NET MVC5 application, to the new ASP.NET Core?
Yes, it's there are differences. There are quite large differences, because just like with the .NET Framework, they try to keep the backward compatibility, but they find out that there are quite a lot of concepts that are obsolete, and they just clean it up. They just clean everything they don't need in this core version. So I think that ASP.NET Core is easier to learn. The ASP.NET MVC is easier to learn because there are quite a lot of things is simplified, but you cannot just do the automatic conversion. Okay, so because we will probably need to leave this room in some time.
We still have 30 minutes.
Okay, but I don't want to keep you here. So if anyone got some other questions, just ask.